You're walking past an old house on the edge of town. The yard looks tired. There's patchy grass, a sagging fence, a porch that's been forgotten. But there's something else that stops your eye. It's a tree. Maybe a crepe myrtle, you can't really tell. But there are bottles hanging from every branch. Cobalt blue. Some dusty, some catching the sun, all of them waiting. A breeze comes, and the bottles clink like bones, soft and hollow, almost like something's rattling in the dark, maybe trying to get in or get out. You ask what they're there for, and someone says, "Those? They're there to keep the Haints away." And just like that, you stepped into something old, something grown from survival, something that still works, even if nobody remembers why. Those bottle trees aren't just garden decoration. They're spirit traps, wards, protective talismans draped in colored glass. They were planted next to yards, graves, crossroads, not for show, but for shielding. Because in folk magic, you don't banish every spirit. Some you distract, some you confuse, and some you trap before they even know they're caught. I'm Papa G, and this is the Feral Folklorist, and today we're climbing into the history, mystery, and power of the bottle tree. From African roots to southern soil, from plantations to modern porches, and why some of those bottles are still catching things we'd rather not name. Bottle trees didn't start in the South. They were brought here. Like most of the oldest magic in this region, they came across the water, packed in memory and held together by necessity. Their roots go back to Central and West Africa, especially among the Congo people, where glass, and especially blue glass, was believed to have spiritual power. Not because it was shiny or rare, but because it echoed the boundary between this world and the next. The Congo cosmology describes a line between the living and the dead that runs through water. It's reflective and ever-shifting and hard to cross clean. Blue glass was thought to mimic that barrier. There was a belief that spirits, especially the restless or harmful kind, could be distracted by sound and sparkle. Hang up something that glints in the light or clinks in the wind, and it might catch a ghost's attention long enough to keep it from crossing into your home. That's why mirrors and beads and bottles were all used as spirit deterrents. The bottle in particular was a kind of trap, narrow at the mouth, easy to enter, but hard to leave. When the transatlantic slave trade forced African people into the American South, those ideas didn't disappear. They adapted. You couldn't keep sacred groves or shrine objects, but you could nail up a row of bottles and pretend it was decoration. You could hang jars from a tree and call it weather protection. And you could practice spiritual defense in plain sight, so long as you didn't name it out loud. That's where bottle trees took root, right in the middle of necessity and secrecy. They showed up most often in the yards of enslaved Africans and their descendants, usually near entryways. There were doorsteps, porches, gates. You'd see a cedar or a crepe myrtle stripped of its leaves and draped in glass, usually blue or clear or green. These bottles were hung upside down, mouth facing out or downward towards the earth, and the idea was simple. A spirit wandering by would be drawn in by the color, the clinking sound, the shimmer of light, and once inside, it would get trapped, confused by the shape and the echo and the tight space. By morning, the sun would shine through and either burn it out or keep it locked away. Some believed the spirit would be destroyed by the light. Others thought it would stay trapped, turning slowly inside the bottle for good. Either way, the point was that it wasn't getting in the house. That wasn't symbolic magic. It was practical. It was built from what was available. No ritual robes, no Latin words, just old medicine with newer tools. A reworked version of old African practices bent to fit the world people were forced into. In Gullah Geechee culture, especially along the South Carolina and Georgia coasts, these beliefs deepened into something more specific. Spirits that caused trouble were called Haints, a southern evolution of haunt. But a Haint isn't just a ghost, it's a restless one. It's a spirit that doesn't know it's dead or refuses to leave, or got called here by grief or anger and now won't let go. You don't try to reason with a Haint. You trick it, confuse it, give it something to chase. That's why you don't see Haint lore tied up with prayers and candles, because it's defensive magic. You paint your porch ceiling blue so spirits don't recognize it as a threshold, or you hang bottles where the wind moves so the clinking draws their attention. You give the restless something to get lost in. So bottle trees are part of that logic. They're magical bait stations, built not to stop the spirit, but to redirect it. You let it wander into the bottle instead of going through your door. And the materials used, it's whatever folks had. There could be wine bottles or medicine bottles, mason jars or milk jugs. Some were reused, some were buried, and some were broken and replaced. But the color blue came up again and again, cobalt, for the sky, the sea, the river. Blue confused the spirit, made it think it had found water, or made it think it had found the crossing over. Either way, it didn't pass the threshold. So these trees weren't accidental, and they weren't just one generation deep. Bottle trees got passed down. If your grandmother had one, chances are she got the idea from her grandmother, who got it from someone who couldn't explain where it came from, just that it worked. As the years went on, bottle trees spread. You started seeing them in the yards of poor white Southerners, especially in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas. And by the 1930s, folklore surveys were recording mentions of them, some saying they were just for looks, others swearing they kept bad spirits out. Even among those who didn't remember the exact reason why, the tradition still stuck. Some families wouldn't let a bottle tree be taken down, said it was bad luck, said it kept things quiet. So over time, the bottle tree moved from backyards to magazines, from Hoodoo to Home Depot. And today you'll find them on Etsy. Welded metal trees with matching wine bottles marketed as whimsical garden decor. That doesn't make them less magical, but it does mean people forget what they're for. And under all this polish, the logic is still there. It's a boundary, a barrier. It's a spell. And for many families, especially in Black Southern homes, the bottle tree also holds memory, not just for defense, but devotion. Each bottle might represent a relative or a prayer or a story, something worth holding on to. In this form, the tree becomes an altar, one that moves and breathes and one that speaks in the wind. So when you see a tree full of bottles, don't just think it's garden art. Think of what it's holding. Think of what it might be catching. And think of what it might be keeping out. Because the bottle tree isn't dead tradition. It's working magic. Right out in the open, just the way it's always been. So a bottle tree might look like just a bit of southern charm, a handful of blue bottles catching the light, this gentle rattling when the wind shifts. But that's not what it is, not really. If you know how to look at it, a bottle tree is a working spell. It is a ward, a quiet trap that never sleeps. It doesn't need prayers. It doesn't even need you to remember it's there every day. But when it's made right, it does exactly what it's meant to: pull in what doesn't belong and keep it from getting through your front door. The idea is simple, even if the work isn't really obvious. You get a tree or a post and you hang glass bottles, usually upside down, always open at the mouth. They have no caps. This is an important part. If a cap is on, the spirit cannot get inside. This is why most people do not hang them with the mouth facing the sky, because it will fill with rainwater. Most of the time, the mouth is facing downward. So, as the spirit passes by, it gets curious, then it gets caught. And some say it gets stuck there until sunrise. And others say it just spins itself down into nothing. Others believe the morning light burns it away, as we discussed before. But the important part is it doesn't make it in your house. That's the whole point of the bottle tree. You don't see blue glass most often. That's no accident. In many African-rooted traditions, blue is protective because we said it mimics the water, confuses the dead, and holds the line between this world and the next. That's why you'll find these Haint blue porches all over the South. Spirits see the color and keep on moving. They think it's water or they think it's sky and they get lost in it. The same logic shows up in these bottle trees. And it's not just the color that does the work, it's the sound. It's the clink or the rattle or the hum. Spirits, especially the kind that drift without direction, are pulled towards movement, towards noise. That's why wind chimes and bells show up in so many protection spells. The bottle tree pulls them in the same way. They follow the sound, they get curious, and then they don't come out. And that's why folks say never break a bottle from an old tree. You're not just smashing glass, you're opening something. Now, when you're building one, placement matters. You don't tuck it in a quiet corner of the backyard and forget about it. You put it where spirits pass, by the road or near the porch or the property line. You want it where traffic is. Some say face it east so that the sun can do its work in the morning. And some plant it near a crossroads for extra coverage. What matters most is the intention. Because it's not decor, remember, it's defense. Some folks build bottle trees to trap, but others build them to honor. In most cases, you'll see offerings tucked inside. They could be names on paper, maybe bits of tobacco, drops of whiskey. Those aren't traps. That's a resting place. It's a call to the ancestors saying, "You're welcome here, but only here." The bottle becomes their house, and the tree becomes an altar. Still a boundary, but with permission. And you're giving permission to a specific set of spirits, ones you know or ones you're related to. And like all spirit work, the bottle tree needs maintenance. Not too much, but it does need attention. If a bottle breaks, just clean it up, wrap it, and then bury it. Don't toss it in the trash. Give it respect. If the tree goes quiet, however, and something feels off, light a candle. Walk around it and hang a new bottle with care, showing that you're tending to it. That's how you show it's still being seen. And that's how you keep the energy tuned for the tree. And if you come across someone else's tree, like on a trail or an old yard or behind a crumbling fence, leave it alone. Especially if it's still standing and still rattling. That working might be older than you. And older doesn't mean harmless. Don't move what you didn't place. Don't open what you didn't build. Respect that trap and be ready to deal with what it catches. Bottle trees aren't dramatic. They don't demand attention. They just work. Every time the wind shifts, every time something crosses the line, and if one of yours starts clinking louder than usual when the night's gone still, listen really close. It might be doing more than singing. There's something different about the way a bottle tree moves when it's doing its job. Not just the breeze knocking glass together, but this kind of rhythm. There's a presence, and you can feel it in your chest before you hear it in your ears. Plenty of folks grew up with one in the yard and never thought twice about it. But once you know what it's for, you start noticing the patterns. Bottles that fall with no wind, sounds that start up when someone's sick, and trees that grow quiet after a death has occurred. Here's what that looks like out in the world, some examples. There's a story of bottles that always broke in threes. There's a family in northern Alabama that tells a story about a bottle tree their grandmother kept near the chicken coop. It was an old tree, had bare branches, was really slick with this years of sun, and it held maybe a dozen blue bottles. Every time someone in the family got sick, like really sick, 3 bottles would fall. Never less or never more. Once it happened a full week before someone had a stroke. Another time, it happened right after a cousin started seeing shadows in the hallway that wouldn't leave. They started replacing the bottles carefully, one each day, in total silence, and they never asked the tree to stop warning them. So that is a case of possibly a tree that had been ignored for a while. So it was really speaking to them, so they had to take the time to maintain it. Now, in the Delta, one story gets passed around about a bottle tree that went quiet after a funeral. It had belonged to a neighbor, a woman who was known for her strong coffee and her sharp tongue, and the way her bottles never stopped clinking. After she passed, her daughter left the tree up, left everything just as it was, but within a week, the bottles stopped making any sound. Not just less rattling, but none, no movement. Even during a thunderstorm, the bottles stayed still. Someone eventually walked a circle around the tree using salt and brick dust, and the wind came back that night. No one said what they thought was going on or what had been caught up in that silence because they thought it was her. But the daughter never let the tree get dusty again. Now, in rural parts of Georgia, there's a belief that a bottle tree can whisper if you listen close, especially at night. One man said his uncle had a tree that only rattled when something was wrong. He remembered sitting on the porch as a boy, hearing the bottle shift and bump, when he thought he heard his own name in the wind. So he went inside. He didn't sleep for 2 nights in a row. On the 3rd day, a cousin he hadn't seen in 10 years showed up, fresh out of jail, looking for a place to stay. He stayed probably about a week, stirred up a mess, and then disappeared again. The uncle said, "You heard it because it was a warning." Now, there's a story about a bottle tree that refused to get any new glass added to it. Sometimes a bottle tree picks its own rules. There's a story out of South Carolina about a woman who tried to update her grandmother's tree. The original bottles were mostly blue, a few were green, and they'd faded with time. Some were cracked at the lip, so she swapped them out for amber glass. It was prettier, she said, more modern. Within a week, 3 of the new bottles shattered. Not from wind or storm, they just exploded. The others started collecting condensation on the inside, something that had never happened before. So she took them down, put the old bottles back up, and the next day everything was dry. The tree rattled soft in the wind just like it always had, and she never changed it again. Now we're going to move over to Mississippi, to one of the more curious cases where there was a man. He said he had a bottle tree for over 10 years with no incidents at all with spirits or anything else, never a broken bottle, never heard anything strange. But one morning, one of the bottles was gone. Not broken, not on the ground. It was just completely gone. The branch it had hung from was still solid, and the wire was still there, but the bottle was missing. That night, his dog wouldn't cross the porch. The next morning, there was a trail of small footprints in the dew, bare feet, child-sized, leading up to the porch and stopping under the branch. So he lit a white candle, scattered salt along the porch rail, and hung a new bottle the next morning. The dog came back, the tree stayed quiet, and he just didn't talk about it again. But that's the thing with bottle trees. They don't make a fuss. They don't tell their stories out loud. But when you stop and listen, really listen, you'll start to hear the shape of something in the wind. You'll hear memories. You'll hear cautions and presence. And if you keep hearing the same bottle clink night after night, when nothing else is moving, maybe that one's yours. So what's the takeaway here? A bottle tree isn't just southern yard art. It's a boundary. It's a ward. It's a magical machine that works quietly without fanfare. It doesn't need a candle or a chant or a prayer. It doesn't even need the priest to come by and bless it. It just needs wind, time, and the right kind of glass. It's the kind of working that doesn't look like magic until you know what to look for. And by then, it's already doing its job. So what's the lesson? Magic doesn't always ask to be seen. Sometimes it just hums softly in the background, rattling when someone gets too close. Now let's talk about how to build one right, whether you're looking for protection or spirit contact or just a little more peace around the space. So to build your own, now, you have to figure out what you're going to use it for, to trap wandering spirits, or to confuse Haints, or just to guard your space from spiritual intrusion. Now, what you'll need is a tree trunk, or a wooden pole, or a rebar frame with strong limbs. Some people actually build them out of wire in the shape of a tree. Maybe 7 to 13 bottles. Blue is always best, but choose what fits your needs. You need some Florida water or some salt water or both. And optional is to have some red thread or some protective herbs or a nail. And what you do is you wash each bottle physically, then spiritually. Use the salt water or the Florida water to clean away any lingering energy. And you set up your post or prepare your tree in a place that sees movement, like we said before, the front yard or the porch edge or the crossroads, some sort of boundary line. And as you hang each bottle, do it deliberately, asking it to do its job to protect your house and to catch the spirits. If you want extra reinforcement, tie a little piece of red thread to the neck of one bottle, or maybe tuck a pinch of protective herb into the mouth of it. When you're done, circle the tree clockwise and sprinkle either crushed eggshell or salt or some brick dust around the base. Now, if a bottle breaks, don't leave it hanging. Sweep it up with care, bury it at a crossroads or under a heavy stone with some words of closure. Don't just toss it in the trash. Now, if you want to refresh a quiet tree, sometimes trees just go quiet, not because they're done working, but because they filled up or been forgotten. So to wake it up, you light a white candle at the base and add one new bottle with intent. And then you sprinkle a little salt around the roots, not much. And then you say aloud, what rattles, shields, what glows, protects. Wake again and hold this ground. Now, if you disturb someone else's tree, what do? If you found an old one on your land or you accidentally broke a bottle by accident, you would wrap any shards in black cloth, add a little pinch of salt and something sweet like honey or candy, maybe a coin, and bury the bundle far from your house. And say out loud something like, I didn't know. I return this to stillness. Let peace remain. And that's how you sort of close the loop. The bottle tree isn't loud magic. It's not showy because it doesn't need to be. It just works. It catches what doesn't belong. It rattles when spirits pass too close. And it stands guard, even when no one's watching. So if you've got one in your yard, thank it. And if the wind picks up but the bottle stays still, you might want to light a candle just in case. I'm Papa G, and this has been the Feral Folklorist. Next time, we're talking about the hex murder of York County, the 1928 killing of powwow healer Nelson Raymeyer, how Pennsylvania Dutch magic turned deadly, and what happens when spell work gets twisted by fear. So until then, keep your bottles clean, keep your boundaries clear, and don't turn your back on the tree after dark. If you'd like to hear the After the Show episode where I go deeper into the folklore, spill a little extra dirt, and sometimes rant just a bit, consider becoming a patron over on my Patreon at patreon.com/PapaG. You can find the official site for the podcast at feralfolklorist.com. And if you need spell supplies for any of the workings we talk about on the show, our metaphysical shop, Aromagees Botanica, has been weaving magic for over 25 years. That's over at aromagees.com. And finally, don't forget about our digital magazine, Folklorium, for articles, herbal profiles, spells, and a little bit of folkloric fiction at folklorium.com.